Center stage today at the Idaho State House, an ethics committee hearing for Lewiston Representative Aaron von Ehlinger. He's accused of raping a 19-year-old legislative intern after the two went to dinner back in March. Eventually, the House of Representatives are going to vote on a range of outcomes, from dismissal of the complaint to expulsion from the legislature. The committee heard hours of testimony today, and Joe Paris, well, he was there, shares with us the details that the committee heard from Representative von Ehlinger to the alleged victims and lawmakers.
Yeah, Brian, certainly a unique day over at the Idaho State House. 8 o'clock early this morning is when the Ethics Committee hearing really got kicked off. House Speaker Scott Bedke was what you would call the first witness to really go up there and file the formal complaint with the Ethics Committee. From there, though, the committee heard hours and hours of testimony, again, from 8 a.m. till about 3 p.m. this afternoon. There were some breaks in between there. A lot to dig into, though, at the State House. Essentially, the House cleared all business for the day, and this was the main focus at the State House, as you could imagine. We'll take you there right now, though, and we'll kind of describe what happened throughout the day. Fairly quickly into the morning, Representative von Ehlinger was actually called to testify and answer questions from the team representing the complaint, as well as his own defense. We'll show you some transcripts that we requested and received a previous private testimony von Ehlinger gave. Now, this is important. During that, he admitted to taking the 19-year-old House intern out to dinner and having what he called a consensual sexual encounter with her. Now, this is notable because testimony today in the public session, we really didn't hear much about the night in question from von Ehlinger. Today, he declined to comment per his counsel's advice or to really answer questions about the sexual encounter or the night in question, or whether he and the victim, referred to as Jane Doe, went back to his apartment after dinner. He essentially invokes what would be his Fifth Amendment right in court. That's his right against self-incrimination. Here's the clearest exchange of the day between von Ehlinger and his legal counsel.
Representative von Ehlinger, to your knowledge, have you violated any written or properly codified or enacted rules, policies, procedures, or laws relating to the allegations which have brought us here today?
No, I absolutely have not.
Von Ehlinger's counsel is referencing the fact that there is nothing in State House policy or law that says a lawmaker cannot have a relationship with a 19-year-old intern. Some lawmakers testified today that it's understood that such a relationship is inappropriate, but von Ehlinger's counsel clearly drove home that he broke no rules, policy, or laws in their opinion by having a consensual interaction. Now, a short time after that, the 19-year-old alleged victim testified, again referred to as Jane Doe to protect her identity. Miss Doe was questioned behind a black curtain to protect her privacy. Now, Doe told the committee that on the night in question, she told von Ehlinger no to his sexual advances, quote, multiple times. She followed up by saying that he just continued. Here is some of her testimony and some of her perspective that she wanted to share with the committee today.
Did you tell Representative von Ehlinger that the sexual contact was unwanted?
Yes.
Did you tell him you did not want to do the things he was going to do?
Yes. I even tried to just convince him to not, telling him I wasn't on birth control and I hadn't shaved myself, or things to make me seem unappeasable, you know? And he just continued. I've thought about this for a while. I just don't know how to say to them that what is done, that how do I explain that right before I got here I was late because I'm panicking on the floor, vomiting on myself in the bathroom, calling my mom because I'm terrified. How do I explain that to the committee, that what you've done to me and that I came in here fighting and earning your respect? But I don't blame you. I forgive you. You're doing your job. And I am too.
That final thought from Miss Doe is echoing frustration from the victim's legal counsel about her having to testify today. Her legal team has argued that she'd previously given detailed and graphic reports and that they didn't find it extremely necessary for her to testify here today. The committee, again, as I mentioned, did actually end for the day at about 3 p.m. after hearing hours of testimony. There was a motion made by the Ethics Committee to really wrap up for the day and then have the evening and tomorrow morning to consider the evidence they heard from the alleged victim, from the representative, as well as other lawmakers and witnesses. Brian, we're expecting the House Ethics Committee to meet again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. At that point, they're going to have what is public deliberation. They're going to have the conversation about the evidence and what they believe happened in public, and from there we'll see what the recommendation will be after a final report. Again, as Brian mentioned, this will eventually end up for a decision on the House floor.
Joe, I find it interesting that his legal counsel, hinging this whole thing on whether or not what he did was, well, whether it violated any written code. I mean, after all, this is an ethics committee deciding on the ethical behavior of a representative. So that's kind of a questionable territory. But I also wanted to ask you this question. This is a fairly new committee for the House of Representatives, and so they're kind of in uncharted waters with this, right?
This is certainly a first at the State House, this type of a situation like this ethics hearing. Of course, the state legislature has dealt with expelling members in the past. Representative John Green, notably a few years ago, was removed after he was convicted of a felony in Texas. Not really the same as what we're talking about here today. And Brian, when I talk with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, they say that this is extremely unique, and they understand that the committee and everyone involved is following a procedure and they're following a step-by-step guide, but this is a first time and there is a first for everything. And you could see during the testimony and the hearing this morning that there were times where really the committee was really making sure that they were taking the correct steps. As you might have seen in some of the video, the House Ethics Committee actually had a special committee counsel with them to advise them on legal matters and operations, as well as what could and couldn't be talked about. So a very memorable day at the State House, Brian, and yes, certainly into uncharted territory.
If you could very quickly, just one final moment, can you sum up kind of the mood of those people that were in that committee room?
It was kind of varied, Brian. During some of those very serious moments, as we heard from the victim a few moments ago, it was extremely quiet and very tense inside the room. Some of the other testimonies from some of the lawmakers and some of the other witnesses, you could feel a little bit more lightness in the room. Of note, this was a very unique situation because unlike a courtroom, there was members of the public there as well as lawmakers, and you could hear multiple times audible gasps, or you could hear chuckling, or you could hear all kinds of, I guess, what you would call commentary from the audience that, to me personally, Brian, seemed inappropriate.
Yeah, that usually in a court of law, a judge would not allow something like that to happen. All right, thank you very much, Joe.